Hello, with Books Not Bombs Sioux City. Today we'll be going over part 2 of our 3-part series for Food Not Bombs by C.T. Butler and Keith McHenry. Beyond food collection and distribution. Street theater. From the very beginning, we saw all our street activity as theater. This included not only our food tables, but also our literature tables, our presence at other people's events, and so on. We recognize that the personal is political, and the political becomes personal, and we wanted to dramatize the reality of our society's militarization by highlighting its social costs and human suffering. We created opportunities to expose these injustices through soup lines, depicting military types holding a bake sale to buy a B-1 bomber, offering the tofu challenge instead of the Pepsi challenge, and even a silent theater piece in which a person dresses as a papier-mâché missile and chased a person in a papier-mâché world, threatening to destroy it. The only limits to what kind of theater you present are your imagination and your pocketbook. The scenarios have included everything from setting up a food and literature table with some musicians to full-scale productions with amplified sound, light shows, slide projectors, puppets, and speakers all happening at once around your food and literature tables. Sometimes these events are planned entirely by Food Not Bombs, sometimes they are organized by other groups, and we just attend with food and literature. Either way, never forget to include your audience in the performance whenever possible. Because we have always approached our work as theater, it has always been easy to adapt to various situations. We recognize and value the interconnectedness of progressive issues. We try to expose how militarism and imperialism influence our everyday lives, and when we participate in an event highlighting a particular issue, we try to show the ways this issue connects with other issues too. Our food is often an excellent bridge or connector. Our literature reflects the wide scope of our concerns. We promote and support many events in our community by carrying their flyers on our tables, and we strive to be as visible as possible. This means searching for good locations to set up a table. Sometimes the ideal situation is in a park or plaza, and other times it is important to set up outside a bank, a corporate office, government building, or military installation. How often to set up is equally important. The more we are outside in the public eye, the more our message gets out, and we encourage groups to be as regular as possible to establish a reputation. The Food Not Bombs table is often a landmark for activists and street folks looking to connect with the movement in a new city. Fundraising. Food Not Bombs has a long-standing tradition of being very relaxed about fundraising. We prefer receiving money in small amounts rather than large, difficult-to-manage donations of money from people who might be quite distant from us, either geographically or politically. We feel it is better to have a wide base of support from the community with whom we have direct contact than to rely on a few foundations or wealthy people who might manipulate or pressure us into catering to their special interests. While this kind of grassroots fundraising is more difficult and time-consuming, it allows us to remain on the cutting edge of the political issues of our time and also requires constant contact with our supporters. Nonprofit tax-exempt status. People often ask us if we are nonprofit, tax-exempt corporation. Generally, we are not interested in the bureaucracy needed to maintain such an organization. Sometimes you might use an umbrella to assist in arranging a particular donation of money that specifically needs to be given to a nonprofit, tax-exempt group, and this is fine. It usually is not too difficult to find a tax-exempt organization willing to do this for you. Specifically, however, do not seek permission from any government agency to engage in the work you do. Once a group becomes tax-exempt organization, the IRS has the right to oversee all aspects of its operation and limit much of what it can do. Rather than trying to hide from them, we prefer to ignore them. Buttons and bumper stickers. One way to raise funds is the setting up of literature tables with buttons, stickers, books, and t-shirts at high-volume pedestrian traffic areas or at political events. Being regularly out in the public eye, exercising your right to free speech, and collecting donations has a tremendous effect. For some groups, receiving donations for buttons and bumper stickers is a major source of income. So when people ask how much, use the phrase $1 or more if you can, less if you can't. Purposefully create a loose atmosphere so people donate what they can without pressure or embarrassment. You will often raise more money and awareness if volunteers stand behind the literature table and direct people's attention to a particular flyer or ask them questions like, "Have you heard about our next event?" At large outdoor events, remember periodically to take the money out of the donation bucket as the day passes, so that no one grabs the bucket and runs off with all that you brought in that day. Catering. Sometimes other groups will ask us to provide food for their events. It might be hot soup at an outdoor rally or lunch for a conference. The sponsoring groups usually give us a donation of $1 or more per person. If they have special arrangements like transportation or housing, they might ask for additional contributions directly from the people you serve. This is up to the organizers. However, if the event is outdoors or open to the general public, the food is always free and never denied to someone because of lack of money. At some events, the food is cooked at the site, while at others it is transported already cooked. Try to be on time at all events. Obviously, this is especially important when you are feeding 100 people lunch at noon during a conference. Also, it is usually possible to bring your literature table and set it up next to the food table or in the lobby or the hallway. Concerts and events. Food Not Bombs groups often sponsor concerts and events both to have fun and to raise money. If you plan ahead, your event can be a big success. Whether for rallies, concerts, or poetry readings, it is important to find a location and date at least 6 weeks to 2 months in advance. When making the arrangements, be sure to get the correct addresses of all parties involved so that you can stay in touch. Send a letter confirming the date, time, and other arrangements to the managers of the location as soon as you can. And once you have a space confirmed, contact the performers and send them letters confirming the date, time, and location and duration of their performance. It would be unfortunate if the performers did not show simply because they never received their letter of confirmation. If the event goes smoothly, these performers will support you in the future. If you are having a concert, ask the bands whether they have sound equipment and a sound person. If not, they may know someone who does. Work out a complete schedule in advance with specific times for each performer, including setup and sound check, and be sure to send the schedule to all parties involved, including the people whose space you are using. Another good idea is the distribution of flyers advertising the event to the local organizations 6 weeks in advance. An announcement in their monthly newsletter or calendar listing can be very valuable. In addition, post flyers all over town and put them on your table for 1 month in advance. If possible, send 30-second public service announcement to local radio stations as well. Make a follow-up phone call to be sure the announcement is received, and suggest it be put in their public service announcement folder. At the event, set up a literature table with buttons, stickers, and shirts. Depending on the type of event being held, you may want to ask for a donation at the door or pass the hat during the show. At bigger events, you may want to create a program that can also be an opportunity for fundraising. The program itself can be sold during the event, and you can sell ads inside it to local groups and businesses. And of course, a table with refreshments would be a good opportunity to raise additional donations. Legal tips. Permits. People sometimes argue that it makes the city happy if you get a permit, so they know you are using some city sidewalk or park. You give them the name of the organization, its mailing address, and a phone number, and they give you a permit. If the permit policy is really that simple, you might look into it, but avoid giving the identity of your group until you know for sure. Case in point. On July 11, 1988, after serving food for several months without city interference, the San Francisco Food Not Bombs group wrote a simple one-page permit request to the Recreation and Parks Department at the suggestion of some community organizers. This unfortunately alerted the government to the meal distribution program and gave it an opportunity to deny us a permit. It then used this as an excuse to harass the food table and arrest volunteers. Although the government may create reasons for denying you a permit, you should not be intimidated. Make clear that you are willing to adopt any proposal that will make your operation safer and more successful, but also that you will not agree to any demand making it impossible for you to continue your operation. Even after long hours of meeting with government officials, hard-earned permits can be revoked at any moment. From the government's point of view, a permit is something it can take away whenever it wants. Remember the Indian treaties? Because of this, we strongly recommend that you not contact the local government. The revolution needs no permit. Nonviolence training. In most places, the authorities recognize that sharing free food and information is an unregulated activity protected by the First Amendment. However, this is not true everywhere. If your group feels it might risk arrest by serving food in public, it would be a good idea to contact a knowledgeable activist or supportive lawyer in your area and spend a day preparing yourselves by role-playing, discussing how you might respond to various situations, and considering the legal consequences of your actions. In fact, if you think you might be facing arrest, it is very helpful to arrange a nonviolence training beforehand. In most areas, local peace groups will be able to direct you to people who can lead trainings. Also, the War Resisters League in New York City has a national directory of trainers and a handbook for trainings if you cannot find an experienced trainer. Gather the group together for a day and conduct your own trainings. Talk about what might happen and some of the ways the event could lead to violence. Discuss how to respond nonviolently. Then do some role-playing and act out some of the possible scenarios. Some people playing the police and others the activists. This is both very educational and helpful for you to overcome your fear of arrest. Legal consequences, jail solidarity, and legal defense for trial, if any, can also be discussed at training. If the government arrests you, non-cooperation. Whether or not you think you actually will be arrested, willingness to suffer arrest can be very empowering. Your lack of fear of arrest actually makes it less likely. If you do get arrested for serving free food to the homeless, non-cooperation with the police is politically empowering and personally satisfying. The most basic form of non-cooperation is refusal to give your name or address. This makes the attempt to dominate you more difficult. If you refuse to identify yourself, the police will often try to intimidate you by holding you in solitary confinement, refusing you access to a lawyer, denying you transportation to court, and engaging in similar threats and oppressive tactics. Politely but firmly tell them that you will not give your name. Most of the time, the police will give up after one or two attempts to scare you. They will book you as John or John Doe and take your picture and possibly your fingerprints. Most states limit the amount of time they can hold you before bringing you before a judge for a bail hearing or arraignment to 48 or 72 hours. During this time, they cannot legally prevent you from seeing your lawyer if your lawyer requests to see you. Of course, don't ever talk to the police about the arrest. Police do not read you your rights anymore, so it is up to you to remain silent. Not only might they use whatever you say against you in court, they may also use it against the other arrestees. Non-cooperation can also mean going limp or refusing to walk with the police. The officers will often use pain holds and roughly throw you around when you choose this type of response. However, it can be very empowering to retain control over your own body. For some, walking with the police feels too much like you agree that you should be under arrest. Not walking and not giving your name are both empowering, but even cooperating fully can be empowering. You know you weren't doing anything illegal anyway, and it's unbelievable that you could be arrested for feeding people. Support. If you do get arrested, there are several things to consider. Always try to have a support person for everyone risking arrest. Support people avoid arrest so they can do various tasks for those arrested. Such tasks include phone calls to family, friends, or employers to explain what happened, tracking those arrested through the legal system so they are not lost or mistreated, contacting the press, managing legal support, continuing to organize, in covering the tasks those arrested cannot do. It is best if the support person has some idea of how the arrestees plan to respond to the legal system. That is, non-cooperation, jail solidarity, bail solidarity, and so on. This way they can keep everyone informed of the arrest's progress and be there with support when needed. It is also a good idea to leave the support person with your identification and some money, just in case you decide you want to get out. Call the media. It is also wise to keep a list of phone numbers handy in case of arrest. On this list should be sympathetic lawyers, support people, the jail, and the press. Getting coverage in the local media can be very instrumental in getting our message out and attracting more support. If possible, remember the name of your contact at each media outlet and talk to the same person each time you call. Have your facts and statements ready, such as the number of people arrested, the charges, who you are, and why Food Not Bombs was doing whatever it was you were arrested for doing. Remember, however, that you are not trying to convince this person about what you are doing. Talk through the press, not to them. Just tell them what it is you want to say and end the conversation. Be polite but firm. Do not let them talk you into saying something trivial or irrelevant, because you will often use this unimportant information and ignore all the good things you did say. Jail solidarity. After you have been arrested, it can be very inspiring for the group to engage in jail solidarity. It is best to discuss and plan this in advance. When arrested, each person has one of the following choices: not giving your name, non-cooperation; giving your name but refusing bail, bail solidarity; or fully cooperating by giving your name and paying bail. If several members of the group are willing either to not cooperate or to engage in bail solidarity, then you can begin planning your jail solidarity. As a group, you can negotiate your cooperation for some concessions from the jailers. For example, you can bargain for access to a phone, the press, or your lawyers. Demand no bail money as a condition of your release, commonly called personal recognizance, or try to prevent the segregation of the participants. The jail system is not designed to respond to a group. It is designed to isolate and demoralize you. The stronger you stand together, the sooner it will be exhausted and meet your demands, or even let you go. Unfortunately, because of the philosophy upon which the jail system operates, jailers are trained to be purposefully vague and inaccurate as a security measure. You never know whether what they tell you is the truth or not. This keeps you disoriented and unable to trust any of the information you receive. Therefore, it is best not to believe anything the jailer says. Remain calm and polite, and use any dialogue with your jailers as an opportunity to explain why you believe in the actions of Food Not Bombs. Highlight the ridiculousness and irony of arresting people who are giving away free food. In nonviolence theory, this is called speaking your truth to power. Trust yourself and remain committed to the plan the group made before the arrest. Food logistics. Cooking for large numbers of people can be very intimidating. It is very different to cook a dinner for 6 at home than for several hundred on the street. But don't be overwhelmed. It can be done. And with the right equipment and a few skills, it can be easier and more fun than you might think. Equipment. The first task is the gathering of a few people who are willing to help with the food preparation, transportation, and serving. These are not jobs to be done alone. The second task is the acquisition of the proper equipment. Most people don't have a 5 or 10-gallon pot or extra large mixing bowls in their kitchen. However, most churches do, and as do many community centers, food service programs, and restaurants. Sometimes one or more of these organizations will allow you to borrow their equipment. Other times you might have to buy it. Used restaurant equipment, stores, going out of business auctions, and rummage or yard sales are excellent places to obtain the necessary tools. In general, the equipment you will need includes 2 or 3 very large pots, 2 or 3 large cast iron skillets or woks, several large bowls for mixing and serving, large kitchen spoons and ladles, 2 or 3 large vegetable knives for chopping, several cutting boards, several plastic containers with lids for the storage, transportation, and serving of food, 1 bread box with lid and attached pair of tongs for self-service, 1 coffee urn with spout for serving liquids, 1 large ice chest for keeping perishables cold on hot days, 1 propane stove, 1 or 2 portable tables, 1 Food Not Bombs banner, personal eating utensils, plates, bowls, cups, spoons, forks, and napkins. This last item involves an ongoing debate around environmental appropriateness. New groups will usually start off using paper plates, foam cups, and plastic spoons and forks. However, there is a good deal of concern about the waste involved in this method. Using paper products made from post-consumer waste paper, avoid styrofoam, collecting used plasticware for recycling, and encouraging people to reuse their cups, plates, and plasticware address some of the concerns around excessive waste and the consume and throw away mentality. At some events, it is possible to request that people bring their own plate, cup, utensils, and cloth napkins. Some Food Not Bombs groups collect large numbers of durable plastic plates, bowls, and metal flatware from flea markets and yard sales at very low prices, cheap enough that if you lose a few at each event, it is not much of an economic loss. However, these items will need to be washed after each meal in a sanitary way, which is additional work. While there is no perfect solution to feeding large numbers of people without creating paper and plastic waste, whatever you can do to cut down on the volume is an opportunity to educate the public about the need to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Portable tables are another story. Folding tables you can buy at the hardware store usually are not sturdy enough to hold large quantities of food. A very portable table that is sturdy consists of a plain hollow core interior door without the doorknob and a pair of sawhorses made from metal joiners and 2x4s. The door as well as the material for the sawhorses can be bought at the hardware store or a lumber shop for under $15. The hollow core door is very light and the joiners allow the sawhorse legs to be easily assembled and disassembled and also allowing easy transportation. The recipes you use can be from this book, another cookbook, or a family tradition, or made up experimentally on the spot. In general, strive to make food that tastes as good as you can. It is just as important to respect the dignity of the people we serve as it is to give them nutrition. Tips on cooking for large numbers of people. Cooking for 100 people is generally not much different than cooking for 10, except that the quantities are 10 times greater. However, for a few things this is not true. Spices and salt in particular should not just be multiplied when increasing the quantity of a recipe. Much less is needed in most dishes. So let your taste buds be your guide. The same is true for the amount of preparation time each dish requires. The larger the volume, the more efficient each task can be done so that the overall prep time is reduced. In fact, when a particular ingredient is in the several dishes of the menu, prep enough of this ingredient for all the dishes at the same time. This can often be done for even events taking place over several days, depending on your available storage space and labor. Again, always strive to be on time for every event where you serve food. Sometimes this is difficult or impossible, but when time is short, you can do the prep work for easy, quick dishes in advance. Do the actual prep and cooking for the longer, more complex dishes at the site itself. Soup is one dish that lends itself easily to cooking at the event. Upon arrival, set a pot of water to boil, and while that heats, start chopping and adding vegetables. Once the vegetables begin to soften, remove half the soup and serve it. With the remaining half, add more water and vegetables and keep cooking. This can go on indefinitely and become a never-ending pot of soup. This same concept can be used in a kitchen setting when there is only a short amount of time to cook a large amount of soup, or when the soup stove is too small for several large soup pots. Follow the normal recipe for vegetable soup, and when the vegetables have been added and the broth just begins to boil, drain off most of the broth and save it in another container. Add more vegetables, a small amount of water to the pot, and continue cooking. This pot should now contain enough vegetables and spice for 2 or more pots of soup, but little broth. When the vegetables are cooked, mix them and the broth together, again in several containers to transport to the serving site. This method should make 2 or more pots of soup using only 1 pot and only a little more at a time. Shopping. Try to obtain all the food you use through recovery or donations. However, not all the ingredients for every recipe can be obtained this way. In particular, cooking oils, spices, and dry goods are often difficult to come by. Therefore, some shopping will probably be necessary. Even though it might cost a little more, shop at your local co-op or health food store, buy organically grown food when possible, and avoid packaging as much as possible. Also, bring your own containers. In the long run, try to shop as little as possible. Identify your regular food needs and study the food industry for places where waste is created. Go to these places and arrange to recover this food or to have it donated. There is no end to the number of programs you can support with free food if you can successfully learn this process. The vision of Food Not Bombs is abundance, not scarcity. Food handling and storage. There are several health and safety concerns related to food handling and storage you should bear in mind. Keep the length of time that you handle or store food as short as possible. If you do not handle any animal products, and if the length of time between food pickup and delivery is a matter of hours rather than days, there is almost no danger. Keep the food in a cool, dry place out of the sun, and wash your hands before handling it. Always wash vegetables before cooking them. If you are out in the field, this can be accomplished by having a 5-gallon bucket of water in which you dip and scrub them, and obviously anybody who has a cold or flu should not prepare or serve food at any time. After events, there is sometimes food left over. Try donating this to a smaller neighborhood shelter or group home rather than trying to find ways to store and refrigerate it. In general, stored food is less nutritional and more susceptible to spoilage. It also requires additional energy to keep it refrigerated or frozen. Meanwhile, the food industry continues to produce more surplus every day. If you have no one to feed your prepared food to, divide it among the volunteers and take it home. Food Not Bombs recipes. I'm not going to go over the recipes, but I am going to read this section on how to use the recipes. Over the years, Food Not Bombs has developed recipes specific to the food available and the number of people who need food but cannot pay for it. Some groups may find these recipes useful. Others may want to invent their own, based on the food available and the need in their area. These recipes are a selection, some easy and others more challenging, some for events and others for street actions. All are inexpensive, feed a large number of people, and if prepared with care, taste great. The suggested number of servings for each recipe is based on a somewhat small serving, approximately 6 to 7 ounces. If you serve a larger portion, be sure to adjust the number accordingly. The utensils we suggest are only the largest ones. Every recipe will need a sharp vegetable knife, a cutting board, assorted mixing bowls and spoons, and so on. If you do not have access to large cookware, the recipes can be cut in halves or quarters, and several crews can operate simultaneously and produce the same volume. It is possible to feed 4,000 people with 4 2-burner propane stoves and a hose for running water. The times given for prep work and cooking are for experienced cooks. If it is your first time with a recipe, then you can expect to take twice the time suggested. The prep time is also for one person, and can usually be shortened with more people. All quantities are to taste. Use enough oil to cover the bottom of the pot. Spices are light, so if your community likes food spicy, increase the amounts. Keep the salt light. Use a small amount, as it changes the chemistry of the recipe. Let people salt and pepper their own portion. Use more of the main ingredients if you have them or if you can afford them. Simple recipes. The following recipes are based on the kinds of food you are likely to receive from the free food collection. These recipes are easy to prepare for beginners and are vegetarian, with no dairy, eggs, or meat. Remember, always try to collect organic produce whenever possible. Bread and pastries. The easiest item to prepare for serving are bread and pastries. After collecting day-olds and seconds from local bakeries, place the cut loaves in a large clear plastic container with a lid. Attach a set of tongs to the container with wire or string. Utensils are easily lost, so tying them down is desirable. Tongs are used so that people do not handle the bread with their hands. Raw vegetables. You will usually collect a large amount and wide variety of fresh raw vegetables. Most of these raw vegetables can be served as they are after a simple rinse. Many soup kitchens do not offer fresh vegetables at their meals, so they are greatly appreciated by people on the street. Be sure to have them available in abundance. You can make many different kinds of raw vegetable salads depending on what kind of vegetables you receive on any particular day. Wash any vegetables that can be eaten raw and cut them into bite-sized pieces. Mix the vegetables together, especially with cabbage or lettuce, and serve as a salad. Add dressing, if any, just before serving, but do not dress the entire salad at once. A dressed salad becomes soggy and unappetizing, and will not stay fresh overnight. Vegetables that need to be cooked can be used for sandwiches and soups. Do not use any part of the vegetable that are moldy. The mycelia, roots of molds, spread throughout the whole vegetable and are invisible and often tasteless, so they are difficult to detect. Many people are allergic to molds, and they could have a reaction even from the okay part because of the invisible mycelium. Steamed vegetables. Many vegetables, especially dark leafy greens and root vegetables, can be washed, steamed, and served as they are. Chop the vegetables into bite-sized pieces and place in a metal colander. Place the colander inside a large pot that has a small amount, 1 inch or so, of water boiling in the bottom. Cook until soft and serve immediately. Tomato sauce. In a saucepan, saute garlic and onions in a small amount of oil. Add spices like oregano, basil, thyme, bay leaf, rosemary, and so on. Add fresh chopped tomatoes and other vegetables like carrots, beets, green peppers, broccoli, and so forth. Stir often and cook until all the vegetables are soft and the sauce becomes thick. Serve over pasta, rice, or bread, and use as a base for chili or vegetable stew. Rice and beans. In a large pot, saute garlic and onion in an oil until clear. Add water and beans. The proportions are 1 part beans to 2 parts rice to 5 parts water. Add 1 teaspoon of salt for each gallon of water, and let the beans boil for 45 minutes, or less if you soak them beforehand. Add rice, 1/2 cup of coriander or cumin per gallon, some pepper, any vegetables if desired, such as onions, carrots, or dried tomatoes. Cover the pot and return to a rapid boil. Stir the beans up from the bottom at this point. Then lower the heat and continue boiling over low heat until all the water is absorbed, or approximately 45 minutes. Do not stir more than once after the rice is in. Fruit salad. Wash and cut the fruit, then mix together. It is better for digestion to serve melons separately, but not absolutely necessary. Add raisins, nuts, shredded coconut, and or sunflower seeds. Lemon juice can be used to prevent the fruit from turning brown and to add flavor. Politics. The name Food Not Bombs states our most fundamental principle. Society needs to promote life, not death. Our society condones and even promotes violence and domination. Authority and power are derived from the threat and use of violence. This affects our everyday lives through the constant threat of violent crime, domestic violence, police repression, and the threat of total annihilation from nuclear war. Such constant exposure to violence, including the threat thereof, leads many people to hopelessness and low self-esteem. Poverty is violence, and one expression of poverty is hunger. Millions of Americans, almost half of them children, go hungry each day. Childhood malnutrition contributes heavily to infant mortality rates, which are higher in the United States than in any other industrialized nations. Globally, we continue to spend more time and resources developing, using, and threatening to use weapons of mass human and planetary destruction than on nurturing and celebrating life. By spending this money on bombs instead of food, our government perpetuates and exacerbates poverty's violence by not providing food for everyone in need. Food Not Bombs has chosen to take a stand against violence and hunger. We are committed to nonviolent social change by giving out free vegetarian food, thus celebrating and nurturing life. Food Not Bombs is an organization devoted to developing positive personal, political, and economical alternatives. Revolutionaries are often depicted as working to overthrow the government by any means necessary. Food Not Bombs groups in general do not have the time or resources to attack, tear down, or overthrow the existing death culture. However, not spending our time trying to overthrow the existing power structure does not mean never struggling with it. By simply exerting our basic rights to free speech and association, we challenge the power elite, and they will try to stop us from focusing on what needs to be done. We want to create new alternatives and life-affirming structures from the ground up. We want to replace the culture of death with a culture of daycare not bombs, healthcare not bombs. Food Not Bombs responds to poverty and the lack of self-esteem in two ways. First, we provide food in an open, respectful way to whomever wants it. We will not make people jump through any bureaucratic hoops designed to control, humiliate, and often punish the people who are poor. Second, we invite people who receive food to become involved in providing that food. This provides an opportunity for them to regain their power and recognize their ability to contribute and make a change. The idea of food recovery or food recycling is not new. Individuals have been dumpster diving to find meals for a long time. However, store owners often poison or lock dumpsters to discourage this practice. Similarly, environmentalists have long advocated composting, but this has yet been practiced on a large scale. Therefore, it is radical political act in today's society to recover large amounts of food in an organized and consistent manner and to feed the hungry the edible part. Although Food Not Bombs does not have a strict political platform, there is generally a political philosophy with which it has become identified over the years. The core of this philosophy is that each local group is autonomous. Each individual and group chooses its own values and politics. This chapter represents some of this philosophy from the author's own perspective. The New Society. Just like many people today, we are concerned about the direction in which the world is heading. Domination, violence, and killing seem to be the predominant choices of our society. This is what we call the death culture. Acceptance of war, nuclear annihilation, environmental destruction, and genocide are widespread, and are the foundation of the power elite's New World Order. More than ever, the death culture is pushing the idea that it is necessary for young people to join the army and kill to have peace. Peace through threat of war is impossible, because using the threat of destruction as a way to prevent war is nothing but domination. Few voices, however, say there is an alternative to domination and violence. Our society places very little value on working for peace, and there is little opportunity to learn about nonviolent conflict resolution, war tax resistance, or creating a life-affirming culture. It is not lost upon us that the major contribution to stopping bombs is our withdrawal from the economic and political structures of the death culture. As individuals, many of us engage in war tax resistance. As an organization, we operate outside the dominant economic paradigm. We do not operate for profit. In fact, we operate with very little money compared with the value of the food that we distribute. Because we generally ignore the authorities, we allow them as little contact with us as possible. But as we want exposure for our life-affirming alternatives, we never hide what we are doing. We might protest directly in front of an oppressive bank, but the contact is on our own terms. Nonviolence in theory. Nonviolence means responding to situations of injustice with action. The key to nonviolence is the ability to see potential violence in a situation before it becomes violent and act to de-escalate that potential. If we cannot stop it from happening, we can at least work to minimize the effects. It is extremely important that we act in a manner consistent with our values. It is never in our interest to use violence against the police or others. On the practical side, they usually can muster significantly more violent force than we could. But more philosophically, we don't want to use power to dominate in our efforts for social change. We want to create a society based on human rights and human needs, not the threat and use of violence. We do not want to dominate. We want to seek the truth and to support each other as we resolve conflicts without violence. Even the food we choose to serve is an expression of our commitment to nonviolence. We try to avoid using any animal products because we see the damage it does not only to the animal but to ourselves, the environment, and the economy. Mainstream food production is an inherently violent process involving the slaughter of millions of animals and the poisoning of our air, water, soil, and bodies with chemical fertilizers and pesticides. The meat and dairy industries control government policies that primarily serve their own financial interests and not those of the public. Nonviolence in practice. As an organization, we strive to be very inclusive. There is room for all progressive political perspectives and for everyone to express themselves. For some, the decision to work for food, not bombs, is a total change in lifestyle. For others, the decision is expressed through a commitment to life-affirming values while continuing to work at a job for pay in mainstream society. We try to value individuals for the contributions they offer without any expectation that they'd be completely divorced from the status quo. Our world is multicultural, and social and political structures need to be sensitive to this reality. Challenging racism, classism, gender bias, homophobia, and other oppressive behaviors is essential to creating a life-affirming, self-sustaining world. Everyone needs to be engaged in multicultural work, and this includes the members of Food Not Bombs, as well as those with whom we come in contact, both on the street and within the other service and political organizations with which we work. One of the unique ways Food Not Bombs engages in multicultural work is the creation of ways to share access to resources. Members identify and obtain food the wider community needs. We provide an example of how a small group of people with limited economic resources can make a big difference in the quality of life for many people by organizing and recovering a waste product of the existing society. It is our hope that the redistribution of resources, other than food, becomes an activity taken on by an increasingly larger number of people. After all, we are the people we are trying to serve. Food Not Bombs groups are open and democratic. Decisions are made using a process called consensus. Consensus creates an environment in which differing opinions can be expressed without fear, and where conflict can be resolved in a respectful, non-violent manner. It is not a competition of ideas to win the favor of the group. Rather, it is working cooperatively to synthesize all those ideas into the best possible decision for everyone involved. The consensus process strives to assure that everyone has an opportunity to share their point of view and to participate in decision-making. Consensus does not mean that everyone thinks the same way. People can agree to disagree and still reach consensus. People become empowered when encouraged to participate and take more responsibility for the decisions and actions of the group. This teaches them not only how to be powerful nonviolently, but also how to seek access to power. We will never live in a society with equal power shared by all people. However, it is possible to imagine a world in which everyone has equal access to power. And along these lines, consensus is a process based on the opportunity for all to participate in decision making. The particular model your group chooses to use will be determined by your size and needs. On Conflict and Consensus, see Bibliography, describes a model called formal consensus. This would be a good place to start in creating your own process. That concludes the chapter on the politics. Next, we will start up on the chapter on stories.